Hi, I'm Bryce Crittenden.
Hi, I'm Caroline Land, and welcome back to EPL's Overdue Finds.
Caroline, how are you today? Are you ready for a extra spooky edition of Overdue Finds?
I am, where it's that time of year when everything starts to feel a little scarier. We had originally planned to talk about The Haunting of Hill House on today's episode, and then something quite mysterious happened. We couldn't find anyone to talk about it with us.
That's that's right. We were this is like late last week. We
Yeah.
always kind of like to have kind of our outlines and everything
Yeah.
all set up about a week before we record. So just in case we need to do any research for anything, we're both fully prepared. And yeah, we did have a guest lined up.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, she wasn't able to make it. And then it's funny because I contacted you on like Friday afternoon, and we're
Yeah.
recording this on a Monday morning. And I'll be honest with you, Caroline, I did not I was not able to do all my research for that episode. So the fact that we're kind of switching up topics today
Yeah.
kind of plays into my favor a little bit.
I do want to talk a little bit about The Haunting of Hill House because it is the EPL's online book club pick, and so it's been made available for anyone with an EPL card. You can download the ebook or the e-audiobook through Libby or Overdrive, rather.
And I'm not sure, are you reading it or are you listening to it?
I'm reading it.
Okay,
Yeah.
nice. The audiobook is, so far, it's really well done. I don't remember the lady's name who's reading the book, but she's been doing a great job with various voices and everything. And yeah, she kind of creates a very kind of creepy tone with it. And yeah, you know what? It's funny because I don't recall when the book originally came out. I believe it was in the 50s, right?
I think so. 59, somewhere around there.
You know what? I'm enjoying it so far as well. Like I said, I'm about halfway through it. I think maybe on the next episode we can kind of come together for our final review of the book. But you said you're about partway through as well, or are you
Yeah.
almost done it?
Yeah, I would say about three-quarters done. I am really enjoying it. I love kind of the feeling of like doom that is encroaching on these characters as they settle into the house and the house kind of reveals itself to them. I just love a creepy house.
Absolutely. Even to the lead up of them kind of everybody getting to the house is
Yeah.
also really good. Kind of setting the tone for kind of the community around the house is also pretty creepy as well. Also with like the housekeepers and
Yes.
everything
Yeah.
like that is also really well done. I also have to ask you, did you watch or are you watching the Netflix series?
I had not. I came out a couple of years ago, I think now, 2018, 19,
Yeah.
and I just hadn't seen it. And I know that kind of a sequel, spin-off, something in the same universe just came out with The Haunting of Bly House. Is that
Hmm.
the one?
Yeah.
And I haven't seen that one either, but I have a feeling you may have checked it out.
So I haven't watched the spin-off series. I'm about 3 or 4 episodes into the 2018 series on Netflix right now, and a lot different than the book. Obviously, it kind of takes place modern day, and then kind of alternates between modern day and it looks like possibly the mid to late 80s, with like a family that was kind of trying to renovate the house and sell it and everything. So it's really well done. It's quite scary actually. And I think this is one of those things where kind of there's an advantage of having shows on Netflix just because they can get a little bit more dark with it than what you would possibly see on network TV anyway. So I'm really looking forward to wrapping up the series. I got to a point where it's funny because I think it was like the other night around 10:30 or so. I was like, oh, I should watch an episode before going to bed. And I'm like, maybe not. There's definitely quite a few jump scares in it.
We may have both seen the 1999 loose adaptation, The Haunting.
Yes. I remember seeing it in theaters when it first came out. 19-year-old Bryce was not familiar at all with the original source material when I saw it. But yeah, it's funny because listening to the audiobook and then remembering that movie, it's like, wow, they did a really good casting choice with Catherine Zeta-Jones.
Yes.
And who's the other actress? Lily
Taylor?
Yes, Lily Taylor. Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah.
So no, interesting casting choices. You can definitely see why some of those actors were cast in that 1999 version. I think it's fairly hard to find on DVD right now. I tried looking for it on streaming platforms, and it's not there. But yeah, hopefully it'll turn back up at some point.
Yeah, I mean, we're 20 years past it now. Maybe it's time for a resurgence of that movie. I mean, you know, Liam Neeson, Owen Wilson, Catherine Zeta-Jones, as you say, like the cast of it was pretty impressive.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny because when I started listening to this to the audiobook version of it, I was trying to think back to the movie and just kind of hearing the book really be read to me. And like I pictured, especially with Lily Taylor being cast as Nell, and that's who really I'm picturing as this book is being read to me.
Yeah, so I'm definitely enjoying reading it. I wasn't too familiar with Shirley Jackson. I have to confess, and I know that you will at least get this reference, if not share it, Bryce, that my main reference to Shirley Jackson is in an episode of The Simpsons where they all get lottery fever, and there's a reference to all the copies of The Lottery by Shirley Jackson being checked out of the library, and then the disappointed people realize that it's not actually about like how to win the lottery. So that was my main like reference to Shirley Jackson. So I had in my head this idea of like, oh, she's a writer that kind of like pulls back a curtain or makes you think one thing, but it's really about another. But I'm really enjoying reading it, and I'm glad that this was chosen to be our online book club pick for October.
Absolutely. So yeah, like you said, the book right now is available. We have unlimited copies of it that are available until October 29th. So you can go in the Libby app and download the ebook or e-audiobook. Of course, if you're listening to this after October 29th, we will still have ebook copies of it. They'll just be limited, but yeah, like I said, I'm enjoying it so far. I'll probably be done it here by our next episode.
Yeah.
So yeah, today, instead of talking about necessarily just about The Haunting of Hill House, we are going to be talking about our favorite, I guess, scary titles really just kind of that tie into Halloween, right?
I was glad you came up with this idea when we were talking about when we quickly realized that no one wanted to talk about the book. It was all very mysterious, and immediately I kind of asked you to clarify: are we talking about Halloween titles, or are we talking about scary titles? Because sometimes they're the same and sometimes they're different.
Yeah, they're totally different at times. I kind of view it this way. My wife Cheryl, she's not a horror movie fan, but if you're putting on something that she considers to be spooky, she's all in on it. So I know that horror movies aren't always for everyone. So, you know, today we are talking about, I might touch on some of my favorite horror titles or scary movies, but I have a feeling we're going to be kind of leaning towards the spooky titles in today's episode, aren't we?
I would say spooky and sometimes not even that, you know.
Yeah.
So that might sum up my list that kind of look at maybe Halloween more of like a cultural event.
Yeah, so we're going to be doing something a little bit different today. It's just going to be Caroline and I on the show. We don't have any guests joining us, and this is probably the first time probably since I think you guest co-hosted with me back in like December of 2019, I want to say.
2018, yeah.
2018, wow. Yeah. Where it was just me and you on the show. So
this is a lot of pressure, Bryce. This is a lot of pressure for us.
There is a lot of pressure. We can't rely on any guests to help carry us today.
I know.
But yeah, what we're going to be doing is Caroline and I, we have 5 of our favorite Halloween picks that we're going to be sharing with you today. We're going to be alternating. I have no idea what Caroline's picked. I think I probably know 1 or 2 off the top of my head, maybe. Probably feel the same way about me too, right?
I think I might, but with you, I think maybe narrowing it down might be the hardest part because I know that you do enjoy kind of spooky and scary and all of that.
Absolutely. So yeah, it's going to be a fun episode today. But before we get into those picks, Caroline, besides The Haunting of Hill House, what's a recent overdue find pick that you can recommend for listeners?
For some reason, I just got into a mood where I just wanted to listen to a lot of Oscar Peterson, who is a Canadian pianist, piano player, composer, and luckily, EPL through our Naxos Jazz Library has an incredible amount of Oscar Peterson's work. So I've been listening to, there's an album that's called, I think, Live from Russia. And I think we've talked a little bit in the past about how sometimes live music albums can be kind of, it's not quite as polished as a studio recording. The crowd is there, and sometimes you just want to hear the musician and not them. But with his playing, being in front of a live audience gives it an incredible energy, and you can just feel that through the music. So I've really been enjoying his music. There's something for kind of every mood. The live version of Place Saint Henri from his kind of works about Canada has been a standout for me.
Nice. So I have to ask you, how do you prefer to, I guess, listen to your music? Are you you just like to have it on in the background at home or while you work?
Yeah, I think I don't usually listen to music while I'm at work, but when I was working from home earlier this year, I got into the habit of that. And then I just like having kind of ambient sounds around me. So if I'm at home, just kind of in the background, either reading or sometimes more honestly, if I'm playing games on my phone, then I'll have it on. We're heading into National Novel Writing Month, and sometimes I like to curate a playlist to get myself in the mood for what I'm writing. And I think that music without lyrics, so piano music, lends itself really well to being able to work on something else at the same time.
Yeah, no, I could totally see that. I'm a person who, I've been working from home since March, and I love having music on in the background as I work. It really can be any type of music at all. Even when I'm going to the office a couple days a week, same thing. It's I'll have my earbuds in and like listening to music. But it's interesting though, as I get older, I definitely do enjoy there's some movie scores, and I'm gonna touch on one a little bit later on in today's episode that I really enjoy. So yeah, I'm just curious to see how you enjoy your music.
Absolutely. It's such a great question. And I think that also when I listen to it too, when I commute back and forth to work, I go kind of in different phases. Right now, I'm in more of a podcast phase where I'm wanting that kind of talking content. I definitely have different playlists again to either pump myself up for the day or distract myself if there's a lot going on. And sometimes I'll put either movie scores or music that sounds like it could be from a movie. And then, I just pretend that I'm the character in the movie, just like reacting, like as it gets like really tense, I'm like, something big is happening right now. So yeah.
Yeah. Or you put on something light, maybe as you're shopping, and you just kind of picture it as more of a montage thing.
Absolutely. And I realized fairly early on that if I'm out in public shopping or riding the bus or what have you, and I've got my mask on, people can't see me lip syncing. So I am mouthing the words. I realize they cannot see my lips, but they can see my hands. As I kind of get a little too into it, that's a danger. It's enjoyable.
It's a good way to social distance too.
Yeah.
People are like, oh, there's that lady. She's just moving her jazz hands around. I'm just going to maybe stay back a little bit further.
Exactly. It's a strategy. Yeah. So what have you been enjoying?
Actually, a documentary recommendation this week. I saw it on Disney Plus, and I was happy to find out that we actually have it in our collection. So I was like, "Oh, this is a perfect movie to recommend." So it's a documentary. It came out in 2018, and it's called Free Solo. Caroline, have you seen this movie yet?
I have not. I keep meaning to, and I've been really curious about it.
Yeah, so it's an incredible documentary. It follows mountain climber Alex Hanold as he attempts to become the first person to ever free solo climb the El Capitan Peak in Yosemite National Park in California. So, for those who might not know, free solo means you're obviously solo as you're by yourself, and you are climbing a mountain or a peak not only by yourself, but with like no rope or anything. It's just you and your hands and your hands. You are pulling yourself up this peak. So it's an incredible documentary, not only for just the cinematography, which I would also just recommend it based on that, but just to hear the story of Alex and why, like, it's funny because like I'm watching this, I'm like, there's no way I'd ever mountain climb. And that's with like all the safety equipment in the world, I would have zero desire to. But then the fact that, you know, you see these mountains in the movie and it's just essentially just like, there's nothing there to hold on to. Like it's just a straight drop. And, you know, he's able to find these little cracks and everything and pull himself up. And it's incredible. And the documentary also goes through the work that he does to get ready for it. So obviously he'll climb it with other mountain climbers first and kind of do almost like a little recon mission, if you will, and kind of plot out where he's going to go to climb up this mountain. The documentary also talks about some climbers who have attempted to do this climb before free solo, but they unfortunately didn't make it. So, and talks with his family, his girlfriend. It's an incredible story, and really, you can watch it with your kids if you want to. It's a great movie.
The images must be beautiful, but I don't think that's a sport for me. Surprise, shocker that the person on a library podcast might not go free solo climbing. Have you ever been climbing, like even in like a climbing studio? What do they call it?
I'm not sure. I have done that once before, and it's something I would definitely do again. It's a really good workout.
Yeah.
I'd have to kind of go back and lift some weights and get back in better shape before I do it again. But I've just done that. I have zero desire to do it out in the actual wild, I guess. But one of the interesting things too about this documentary is that, you know, I talk about the cinematography and everything. That's also part of the movie too, because he's got this crew with him and they're talking about how they want to get this incredible footage, but they also don't want to get in his way. So they want to watch shadows and everything. So they're not blocking him or his view. So it's really, really cool. Like I said, we have the DVD that you can borrow from us. So definitely check it out.
I think it was nominated for an Oscar and maybe even won.
So yes, this movie actually did win the Oscar for Best Documentary Feature in 2019. So that could be where a lot of people probably heard of it for the first time.
Yeah, that sounds like a great one. And I'm glad, like you say, we have it in our catalog for people to check out.
Mm-hmm. All right. So as we mentioned at the start of the show, we're going to be sharing some of our favorite Halloween picks and maybe some of our favorite scary things. So Caroline, at the risk of sounding like Ghostface from Scream, do you like scary movies?
Sure. I wrote that question for you for our outline, and then I was like, okay, what's my answer going to be? And then I landed on sure, because I do. I mean, I love movies. That's not a surprise to anyone who's listened to more than, 5 minutes of the podcast. And I will definitely watch scary movies. I don't mind being scared, but I don't know that I seek them out. And there's definitely a lot of movies in the horror scary movie back catalog that are gaps in my movie education. And so this year, actually, looking back on it, I have watched a lot of some of those more foundational slasher horror movies this year. And looking back on them, it's kind of like, oh, that's where that comes from. That trope of this happening or that, it's like, oh, that happened here for the first time. So going back and watching those has been been a good experience. What about you, though? You do like scary movies.
I'm a huge scary movie fan. It's funny because comedies are my favorite genre, but there's something about horror movies where they come out and no matter how bad they look, I always want to watch them. They keep you on the edge of your seat. It's funny because I was actually just having a conversation with some friends on the weekend about this and how it seemed like I think I was really the only person in my friend group that really enjoyed kind of a good scare, and kind of the notion that my one friend commented about how he's like, you know what, there's enough terrible stuff going on in the world. I don't need to sit down and watch it anymore for, an hour and a half or 2 hours of my time. So I think it's one of those things too, where, I was thinking about it growing up, all kids kind of went to sleepovers and stuff like that as kids, but it was almost kind of like a rite of passage for kids in the 80s and 90s, like myself growing up, where video stores are very popular. So you'd have these sleepovers with friends, and of course your parents would drive you to the video store, and of course you'd pick up a copy of Friday the 13th or Nightmare Before Elm Street, all these classic horror franchises that were so big in the 80s. It's stuff that I grew up on, and I don't know if I just became desensitized to it at all, but yeah, that stuff is almost like comfort food for me in a very strange way.
Yeah, there was, looking in a little bit into The Haunting of Hill House, there was a note on it that it was more terror than horror. And I then had to look up what that meant. And terror is kind of like the building up of the scariness, and horror is seeing how it all plays out. I think a lot of what I tend to be drawn to is that the terror stuff of it. Give me a creepy old house. Even right now, we are recording, and I wish people could see this. I have a window behind me that looks out over the Fulton Ravine, and so there are these like trees, like leafless trees in the background, and like I kind of wish that I had paid someone to come and just stand behind me. Because that's the kind of thing, right? Like the minute, and I was adjusting myself a little bit so that I could be seen on camera and for our record. And it's like if this was a movie and you had this shot, I would be like waiting the whole time for something to come in that space right there. And because I've set that up. And so living in that, like, what's going to happen space, I think is where I'm drawn to in terms of scariness. And then I think that's why I particularly like movies that have like a really effective jump scare. It's less about kind of like the slashing or gruesome death or fighting like with some kind of demon or monster or something. That potential of you've entered into kind of a creepy space and you don't know what's going to happen.
That's a great point. I never really thought that much about the difference between terror and horror before, but that's a perfect description. Looking at it too, I'm definitely more on the terror side than the I guess the horror side of, like, Jason carving up some teenager in Friday the 13th. That part isn't scary, but what is scary is the just that dread of knowing that something terrible is going to happen. You don't know when or where it's going to happen. Yeah, and some recent horror movies such as Hereditary have done such a great job of kind of laying this groundwork of just setting the scene of this absolute terror that you're gonna go through really for the next 90 minutes. So yeah, I love that part of it too. But great description.
Okay, so let's get into this. Bryce, what is your first pick?
All right, so my first pick is going to seem like an obvious one, but also should start too and just say, I don't know if you put yours in any order. Okay. Mine kind of are in I guess a little bit of an order, not really, but we may overlap here. So this one right here is kind of like I wouldn't say it's like my number one pick, but I'm going to start off with it. And that is Halloween. So kind of seems like an obvious choice here. I'm not actually taking the entire series, but I'm actually going to recommend, obviously, the original 1978 version directed by John Carpenter. And in my opinion, the true sequel, which came out in 2018, which was also called Halloween. The series helped make Jamie Lee Curtis a huge star when it came out in 1978. And really, the first Halloween movie, that was kind of the start of the whole slasher genre. We wouldn't have Scream. We wouldn't have Jason Voorhees if it wasn't for the original Halloween movie in 1978. What I really like too about the sequel, kind of the unofficial sequel, I guess, from 2018, is that we see Laurie Strode, who of course is played by Jamie Lee Curtis, 40 years after the events of the first movie. She's obviously dealing with some serious trauma from all the events that have taken place. The sequel seems very plausible with Michael Myers returning. And also too, I'm going to recommend as part of like this like Halloween 3-pack here is the soundtrack featuring the iconic score from director John Carpenter. That's one of the songs I have on my phone, and it's on kind of all these like playlists that I have that I do like to have on in the background when I work. And just that whole package of the first movie, 2018 follow-up, and the soundtrack to me is perfect Halloween material.
This was one that I have on my list as well. So I will talk about it. It was one of the ones that I was just referring to a couple of minutes ago when I said I watched a bunch of movies for the first time this year. That was Halloween. And watching it, seeing a young Jamie Lee Curtis, I can see why she was known as a scream queen for her role in this. The movie was in some ways not really what I was expecting. There was more bureaucracy in it than I thought there might be, but I also kind of like wondered, I wanted like it to go really, really deep in the psychological assessment of Michael Myers, but I think, like you say, that comes over time as he becomes a character who has like evolved in terms of the meaning of who he is and the motivations for everything. But just watching it on there, I just wanted to scream at the characters, like, there's a murderer running around, like, come on, like, get your act together. But that was good because it meant that I was invested in the movie and what's happening. The music was chilling and kind of reminded me in some ways of the Unsolved Mysteries theme. You know, like some of that like synthy, creepy, eerie stuff, definitely. So it's on my list kind of as a placeholder for some of those movies, but then also because it's so iconic as a Halloween movie. I mean, it's right there in the title. You can't not have it on your list.
Absolutely. And like you said, too, it's like when you watch it, you're like, oh, we would not have Scream if it wasn't for Halloween. Yeah. Really. I have to ask, did you watch the 2018 version of Halloween?
No, I haven't seen that one.
Okay. Obviously I recommend it. You should definitely go watch it. For me, I don't really recommend any of the sequels. Like Halloween 2. Halloween 3 has absolutely nothing to do with Michael Myers. It's the weirdest thing. I would totally recommend that Blumhouse production from 2018. Rob Zombie had also kind of did a remake and then a sequel to that remake. And I want to say maybe around 2011, 2012. Those movies are like, just like Rob Zombie is, they're extremely dark, just kind of what you would expect. Really, I did not like part 2 at all, but the first one's okay, but just a word of warning, it gets very dark.
What about Halloween H2O, which I did see in 1998?
Yeah, I also saw that movie. I don't really remember a lot of it besides that Busta Rhymes was in it, and I think he drop kicks Michael Myers at some point during the movie. I don't think it's probably aged that well, but like I said, I think if you stick to the original and then you watch the 2018 one, it's a perfect follow-up to it.
Okay, so what's next on your list?
All right, so next on my list, I have a big shocker, Stephen King title, but I went with It, actually, for mine. To me, a perfect Halloween title or movie has to involve kids of some point. Like, there's so many horror movies out there, and I wouldn't necessarily consider them to be like, I get it, you know, it's horror, it's Halloween, you should be scary, but it's perfect because of you have this iconic villain, Pennywise the Clown, who now is pretty much has ruined the I feel bad for any clowns who kind of relied on kids' birthday parties for your business, because Pennywise has pretty much destroyed the notion of the friendly clown. I'm actually recommending the original book by Stephen King, and then also the 2017 movie and the sequel.
I see how this is, Bryce. We said we would have a top 5 list, and I think by the time we're done here, you're going to have about 15 items that you've recommended. I see how this is.
That's right. Well, just in general, but you know what? If
I love
we got to
a
narrow it
loophole.
down, I would do the book.
No, I love a loophole. It's all good.
Nice. But what makes this villain so great is because obviously the kids are at the center of the story, and their fear for Pennywise is what makes the clown stronger. I wasn't a huge fan of the follow-up to the 2017 movie, but much like Stephen King's books, also too like the book, I wasn't a huge fan of the ending, but the interactions, kind of the kids and Pennywise, you know, you have the Losers Club kids all coming together, these misfits, and they have these terrible experiences, and they all have to come together to fight this dreaded clown Pennywise. But to me, it is everything you want in kind of, I guess, building up that terror, and there's some great horror in there. All right, so Caroline, how about you? I know we kind of overlap there on Halloween, but
Yeah.
what do you have on your list?
I think I'm gonna pick one for my next pick. I would be surprised if it's on your list and thrilled, but it is called Mad Monster Party. And
No.
have you ever seen this, Bryce? It's a
No.
1967 stop motion animated musical comedy by Rankin Bass, who are probably most famous for Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer and those stop motion Christmas TV specials. This was a feature film release. I think it was their only full-length movie that was released, and it did not catch on and has kind of become a bit of a cult film. But I like imagining a parallel universe where this became as tied to Halloween as Rudolph is to Christmas. So the plot of Mad Monster Party is that Baron Boris von Frankenstein, who is voiced by Boris Karloff, so already the pedigree of this is really high. He achieves his ultimate ambition, the secret of total destruction. So having achieved the pinnacle, he decides to retire from the worldwide organization of monsters and invites all of the other members to his Isle of Evil, where he will tell them who is going to be his successor. So in this movie, we have the best that the public domain could offer in terms of who is invited. Count Dracula, the Mummy, Quasimodo, the Werewolf, the Invisible Man, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, and the creature from the Black Lagoon, who could only for legal reasons be referred to as the creature.
Of course, yeah.
Baron von Frankenstein, of course, has a monster who they call Fang, and Fang is married to Mrs. Monster, who's voiced by Phyllis Diller. And
Nice.
She is having a ball with this role. She is just going for it. So the whole movie, it's about an hour and a half, and the whole movie is just all of these like evil monsters trying to outsmart each other, trying to avoid getting killed as they try to maneuver for the leadership of the worldwide organization of monsters. You have to see it to believe it, is where I landed on it. And it is available. We have a copy at EPL.
Is that on DVD then, or is it streaming?
It's on DVD.
Yeah, I have to borrow that. I'm a huge fan of the kind of the Rankin Bass stop motion, Rudolph and Santa Claus is Coming to Town.
Yeah.
Great titles. So that sounds like a lot of fun. Boris Karloff, Phyllis Diller.
Yeah.
So I didn't catch on.
It is not specifically Halloween, but when you have all of those creatures together, it has that very kind of feel of a Halloween party gone wrong.
Almost sounds a little bit like the Monster Squad. Have you ever seen that movie?
No.
Oh, you are in for a treat. So the Monster Squad came out in 1987. This group of kids, very similar to It, where they're kind of like the Losers Club. And there's like this amulet. And because of this amulet, Dracula, the Mummy, Wolfman, Frankenstein, all kind of come to this like small town, and it's up to these kids kind of under the age of 12 to defeat them in order to save the world. It's definitely a cult classic. You should definitely check it out. Sounds like a great double feature there.
Yeah, I will definitely be looking for that to round out my Halloween experience. So that one was not on your list, it sounds like.
It was not.
What do you have next?
All right, so my next pick is kind of says it in the title as well. It's kind of an unconventional Halloween title, but it's a graphic novel called Batman: The Long Halloween. This one collects some issues that originally came out in 1996 and 1997, and it's kind of a follow-up to the really big Batman graphic novel called Batman Year One. So in this series, we're dealing with a young kind of Bruce Wayne and Batman who's a little bit inexperienced and is kind of still finding his way fighting crime in Gotham City. So this one, though, tells the story of a mysterious killer by the name of Holiday. And he, of course, murders people on holidays, one each month. Halloween is coming up. So, of course, Batman has to work with Harvey Dent and Detective Gordon. And basically, they have to race against the calendar to try and discover who Holiday is before he claims his next victim. Also making an appearance in this graphic novel, we got a who's who of Batman villains. Kind of goes to Arkham Asylum to try and investigate who this is. So we see the Joker, we get Penguin, we got Poison Ivy, the Riddler, Mad Hatter. Kind of set in all this as you have this big kind of mob war happening in Gotham City as well that kind of drives Harvey Dent in. So not a traditional Halloween title, but it's one of my favorite Batman titles that takes place around the time of Halloween. So if you're looking for something a little bit different, this is a great, I would call it a spooky Batman title.
As you were listing off all of the villains, I was wondering, why do they think it's a good idea to put them all in the same place?
That's the constant question with Batman, I guess, is like, of course, Batman doesn't kill. So all these guys just, they get out of Arkham Asylum and Batman just puts them right back in. And I just know one thing, I would not want to be a guard at Arkham Asylum.
Yes, that it just wouldn't be worth it. No.
No, it wouldn't.
No.
So Caroline, how about you? What's next on your list?
Next on my list, I'm going to go for Babysitter's Club #2, Claudia and the Phantom Phone Calls.
Ooh.
So
this sounds spooky.
Yes, I picked this one because, like I said, it's #2 in the series. So if you have not read the Babysitter's Club books, you can either start at #2 and you'll probably be fine, or just pick up Christie's great idea. It's right there. It's probably right next to it. Halloween is coming. There's going to be a dance at Stony Brook Middle School. There's going to be the Halloween hop. But there's also something mysterious happening in Stony Brook. People's houses are getting broken into by someone who calls, finds out if you're home, and then breaks into your house. So the Babysitters Club notice that they're starting to get a lot of phone calls, and they start to get worried that the houses where they're babysitting are going to get burgled. And Claudia decides that there needs to be a way of approaching this. So she comes up with all of these plans. And by the end of the book, they have found themselves caught up in this mystery in a way that you might not have seen coming. So there's a lot of mystery, a lot of spookiness in this title. It was written and published in 1986. So this book actually gets overlooked a lot when they do some of the updates to it, because it involves, like, the plot requires the home where they're babysitting to have a landline and then no caller ID or some way of obscuring it. because otherwise the phantom phone calls would not really work out. So there have been attempts to modernize it. Sometimes it just gets skipped altogether, but it does kind of capture that sense of being like 11, 12, 13 years old, being home alone, and like something kind of ordinary but just a little off happens. I remember this was a really big deal back around this time of like, you would never say that your parents weren't home,
That's
like
right.
kids were taught how to like answer things like, oh, they're not available or they can't come to the phone right now. And because you wouldn't let the person know that you were on the phone alone. I don't know if kids still get taught that with cell phones. Like when I call someone, which is very rare, I just kind of assume that they're not home.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, I mean, I don't have any kids myself, so I have no idea. But yeah, that's kind of weird because yeah, growing up too, it's like you were kind of like they would like scare the bejesus out of you in like
Yeah,
school with just answering the phone
yeah.
while you were at home alone. But yeah, it's really interesting because yeah, and I think it's one of those things now where it's like your phone rings, you're like, I'm not picking that thing up unless I know who it is exactly. So
Yeah.
yeah, that really would be a tough one to modernize. It kind of made me think too, we should almost do an episode of the podcast where we talk about like movies or books that you cannot update because like cell phones would just kind of ruin the plot of the movie.
Yes, there are a couple episodes of Seinfeld. I know that they've looked at this and just like read off for a variety of reasons wouldn't be able to happen today, or a cell phone solves this, or there are a bunch of movies and TV shows from like the late 90s where they create these, like, they know they have to acknowledge cell phones, but they haven't come up with a workaround for the plot. So they just have like a throwaway line about like this incredible reason why this cell phone isn't going to be working for this situation.
Feature episode of Overdue Finds coming your way.
Yeah. Claudia and the Phantom Phone Calls is available in both print and ebook version from EPL.
Which also reminds me too, we probably are due for a Babysitter's Club episode of Overdue Finds now.
I'm always down for that. I think the Netflix series has been really well received. There's a lot of books on there. I would not hold you to reading all 131 books of the main series. But I mean, I have. So if we're going to get into it, it's definitely an area where I have a lot of knowledge, including the fun fact that Kirsten Dunst, who was a child model, was the child model for the cover of the original copy of Claudia and the Phantom Phone Calls, where
Really?
Claudia is holding a small like child on the cover while she's like answering the phone in horror, and the original model for that was Kirsten Dunst.
Well, there we go.
Yeah.
Some inside scoops on Babysitter's Club today.
Yeah, and also if you're a parent out there, we want to know, what are you teaching your children about telephones? Like, how does is that even a conversation you have with them? So email us at podcast@epl.ca.
Yeah, we're curious.
Yeah, we want to know.
My next pick, Caroline, this could be one that maybe is on your list. We'll see if it crosses over. I am recommending the 1966 television special, It's the Great Pumpkin, Charlie Brown. Do you have this on your list?
It's not on my list, but I wholeheartedly agree.
Oh, Cheryl and I just watched it again this weekend. This is probably, this is up there with I love seasonal specials. So like Christmas specials, Halloween, I absolutely love them. And this is probably my second favorite, only behind Charlie Brown Christmas. So of course, this special still holds up. And of course, it's the classic story of Linus trying to get everyone excited for the arrival of the elusive Great Pumpkin. Of course, everybody's making fun of Linus. Linus convinces his crush, Sally Brown, to wait in the pumpkin patch with him for the arrival of the Great Pumpkin. Of course, Sally, as she says, she ends up missing out on tricks or treats because she's waiting with her crush, and she is not happy about it. So just that whole storyline with the Great Pumpkin is absolutely hilarious to me. And the other part too that I really love about this special is poor Charlie Brown, by the way. Like that kid deserves a break. So he, first of all, he has a terrible ghost costume where he clearly tried to cut a bunch of like eye holes, and they're like all over his ghost costume. And then they go trick or treating, and they go to these houses, and I don't know what kind of neighborhood Charlie Brown's living in, but like the kid goes to like 5-6 different houses. He just is given a rock for Halloween. So I don't know, was that a thing in the 60s? Like, I get trick or treat, but like, was that really like that obvious where you could potentially get like a rock thrown in your candy bag?
I feel for Charlie Brown because quite often the children are mean to him or exclude him or yank his football away. But this would be the adults, right? Like the adults are getting in on like this treatment of poor Charlie Brown.
And they clearly see his terrible ghost costume. So they make the decision right then and there that, you know, we're going to give all these other kids who have polished looking Halloween costumes, we're going to give them some candy. But this poor kid who clearly had to put together his own costume, we're going to give this kid a rock. And it's just hilarious because like the kids are going through, it's like, oh, I got candy, I got chocolate, and then he's just like, I got a rock. And it goes on like that for like 3 houses. It's sad, it's funny, but yeah, if you're looking for a great kind of one-off TV special, it doesn't get any better than It's the Great Pumpkin, Charlie Brown.
Yeah, the Peanuts kind of empire was really good at creating these specials for a variety of holidays. A lot of them, we talked earlier about the Rankin Bass stop motion around Christmas. I know that they've tried on other holidays, but TV specials didn't really catch on the same way they did for Christmas. So it's great to see yearly tradition like that for Halloween.
A couple of years ago, I talked about this once on the podcast before. I read the Charles Schulz biography, which is really good and recommend it again. But the one thing that's really interesting about it, and you see it first, obviously, in the Christmas special, is that it was the first, my understanding from reading the book was that it was really the first cartoon to actually have kids voice children versus, you know, having adults do it. And you can obviously hear it in the performances in both the Halloween and really the Christmas one, and pretty much any of the other Peanut specials. And yeah, it's just fun stuff.
Yeah, I think that's definitely one of the reasons that it kind of resonates. There's a sweetness to it, even when, you know, characters are being mean or saying awful things, or in Charlie Brown Christmas when Sally is listing all of the things she wants Santa to bring her. There's still kind of that touch of childhood about it that is really fun.
Yeah. So Caroline, how about you? What's your next pick?
Next pick, I'm going to take you to 1993, and we are going to talk about Hocus Pocus.
Ooh.
So
this is please share your thoughts on it, because I've got my own thoughts.
Okay, well, I don't really have that many. Like, this is the thing that Hocus Pocus, which is a movie about 3 witches, the Sanderson sisters, has kind of, I feel like it's been brought back to kind of a cultural awareness that it didn't necessarily really have for, I would say, the last 15 years. It was there, people referenced it, but it seems to have become a bigger thing in the last, I would say, about 5 years. I had to look it up because I think I might have mentioned this before on the podcast. The area where I grew up did not have a movie theater. So from the time when I was like born until I went to university, if I watched a movie in a movie theater, it either involved a 3-hour drive or it was in the summer. And if it was in the summer, we spent time at our cottage in Quebec that we would drive over to the Vermont border to see English language movies. So I was thinking about Hocus Pocus, which I know I saw in the theater, and wondered, like, why was that? I looked it up. It was released in July. So my first thing around Hocus Pocus is what was happening in 1993, where they were like, let's take this clear Halloween movie and drop it in the middle of summer. And it was still a big hit, really. Like, it did well. It definitely caught on. But I don't know. I have questions. I need to do some research into 1990s movie distribution decisions. And then after that, it was just kind of like a movie that you watched. I remember being in elementary school, and like we would have our Halloween party, and the teacher would, like, we would all get our snacks, and then the teacher would put on a movie, and it would be something like Hocus Pocus. And so it was just always kind of there. But now seeing this kind of resurgence of it, I don't know if it's because of the over the top characters, the fact that they're, there's interest in identifying strong female characters, which the witches played by Bette Midler, Kathy Najimy, and Sarah Jessica Parker definitely are. I know nostalgia is playing a role in it, but it's kind of curious to see this kind of modern reaction to Hocus Pocus.
Yeah, I read something the other week. I think it might have been the number one movie at the box office on the weekend. It was close with Tenet or something like that, just because it's been getting, theaters are looking for movies to go and to play. And obviously they've kind of re-released it. A couple of theories I have obviously is like, just because it's old enough now where it's like, kids, when they saw it as kids and they loved it, and now they have their own kids and they're kind of at that age, like maybe that 9-10 age where it's appropriate for them to watch it. And so, yeah, I think it's kind of this weird wave of maybe just obviously nostalgia, and then parents wanting their kids to watch it for the first time with them, which would totally make sense to me. I actually just watched it for the first time a few weeks ago with Cheryl, and she loved it. I was kind of indifferent to it, but I can totally understand why it's so popular. Why it's so popular right now. It's a fun movie, and I mean, it also has that one thing that I also love in kind of like the family Halloween movies, and I would put Casper in this group as well, where it's like there's always like the town Halloween dance or get together, and it always takes place at like the old kind of spooky house or something like that, and it just looks like a lot of fun.
Yeah. So I think whether you are revisiting it or maybe watching for the first time, this seems like a good time to check out Hocus Pocus. Are we at your number one pick, Bryce?
Yes, we're at my number one pick, and this is definitely my number one pick. I am going to go with, and Caroline, I might be stepping on your toes here, the Treehouse of Horror episodes of The Simpsons. Caroline, did you have these on your list?
The only reason I did not was because we don't have it in our collection, but I am so glad that you are talking about them, because I kept coming back to them as I was thinking about what really meant Halloween to me.
Yeah, absolutely. We unfortunately do not have these in our collection, but as a collections tie-in here, being the responsible marketer that I am, we do have some Treehouse of Horror graphic novels, which tell different kind of Simpsons Halloween tales, which you can borrow from us. But getting back to the actual Simpsons episodes, though, a couple of little fun facts about them. They actually started doing, and at the time they weren't called Treehouse of Horror yet. The first few were called Simpsons Halloween specials. And they started during season 2, and the first one aired on October 25th, 1990. Young Bryce was in the 6th grade when that episode came out. And actually, the next one will actually be coming out on November 1st. And that one is Treehouse of Horror 31. And kind of thanks to Baseball World Series, last few years, we've been getting the Treehouse of Horror episodes like almost like post-Halloween. So it seems like right around maybe the first weekend in November. But either way, they're all great. And so, of course, the Treehouse of Horror always takes place. There's always like 3 separate little tales. A lot of times they'll spoof pop culture or other kind of horror news or horror movies in general. The one thing, Caroline, actually started watching them from the beginning this past weekend. The one thing I thought was really fun about especially the first 2 years is you have Marge coming out. She comes out on stage and is warning parents that what they're about to see is so violent and so scary that we don't want to get letters from you parents, which is always funny. So just watch it. And the second Treehouse of Horror, of course, Marge comes out. She's like, I warned you last year. We don't want to get any more letters from you parents. Please, this year is even more scary and more violent. My personal favorite Treehouse of Horror, though, is Treehouse of Horror 5. And that one features the Shining spoof, which, of course, if you listen to the show, you know I'm a huge fan of The Shining.
If you listen to like earlier in this episode, you know that you're a huge fan of Stephen King.
Yeah. And of course, that also features a great one where Homer goes back in time with the toaster. And the teachers at Springfield Elementary become cannibals and try and eat all the kids. So that is my absolute favorite Treehouse of Horror. And to me, it's not Halloween until we get some Treehouse of Horror episodes. Caroline, do you have a favorite Simpsons Halloween special?
Yeah, I'm just verifying which year it was. Mine is Treehouse of Horror 7, which has the first one is The Thing and I, which is where we discover Bart's long lost evil twin Hugo.
Hugo, yeah.
It also has the Genesis tub where Lisa creates a tiny civilization in a petri dish, and Citizen Kang, which is a look at the 1996 election where Kang and Kodos steal Bob Dole and President Clinton and then impersonate them for the remainder of the campaign. And yeah, I just... the Treehouse of Horror episodes, there's so many great ones. I also love the advertising creations come to life.
Oh, yeah.
And they need to reach out to Paul Anka to figure out how to create a jingle that'll get them to stop. The Raven is a really great one from either the first or second season or the first.
That's the very first Treehouse of Horror one. Yep.
Yeah, and just there's creativity that you can see them using. That, I mean, the Simpsons world is pretty elastic in terms of what you can do. I mean, Homer's gone to space, Bart's had an elephant, all of these different things, but with the Treehouse of Horror, you can do some pretty interesting non-canonical stuff in there.
Yeah, no, they're some of my absolute favorite episodes. You can tell the writers have fun with it. It's funny too, because like when you first watch it as a kid, when you get older, you start seeing other stuff in pop culture, and like, you know, it's like the Raven. The one I thought of too, I think it was on the second Treehouse of Horror, where Bart can control, like, basically whatever he wants in his head, it happens. So everybody has to be like super nice to Bart. That was an episode of the Twilight Zone. So yeah, there's a few of these things where, you know, as you get older, you realize that kind of a lot of these were in pop culture first, but just fun stuff. And to me, those equal Halloween. Yeah.
And again, like thinking back to it being a tradition, it absolutely is by now, whether it comes before or after Halloween, depending on what's happening with the World Series. Yeah, definitely a tradition for the last 30, what did you say, 31, 32 years?
It's coming up on their 31st special.
Wow.
So it feels so old.
Yeah, that's even pre-Hocus Pocus.
Yes, definitely. So Caroline, what is your final pick?
My final pick, I had to go with the very first thing that I thought of, something that again is not truly Halloween, but pretty closely associated with it, and that is Monster Mash.
Oh, yes.
The song, which is available. There are a number of like Halloween party compilations that are available to borrow or stream from the library as a novelty song. It is pretty funny. It's got a good beat. I just think, again, going back to Mad Monster Party before, Monster Mash is just kind of this fun party atmosphere of, you know, seeing all these characters getting together and hanging out. So it was a big hit when it was released in the 60s. It was released the same year as The Twist by Chubby Checker. And the site that I was looking at, I mean, it went to number one. It was a big hit. People really grabbed onto this. It was a graveyard smash, you could even say.
That's one of those songs you can't help but like get a smile on your face when you hear it.
Yeah.
Not that you hear it a lot everywhere, besides being out on Halloween or whatever. But yeah, it's such a fun song. I'm so glad you you mentioned it, because when I was doing up my list, I was trying to think of like, that's why I kind of included Batman: The Long Halloween, was I was trying to think of like stuff that wasn't so obvious. And yeah, when you said it there, I was like, oh, thank God you said it, because it wouldn't really feel like a Halloween list
Right?
without including Monster Mash.
So that was my number one pick. We've gone through our top 5. I did also want to I had an honorable mention, which was not an item, which is why it didn't end up on my list. But I just wanted to give a shout out to the movie scene of a Halloween party as a way to show that someone is an outsider. And I can think specifically of Mean Girls and Legally Blonde, where someone shows up at the Halloween party either in the wrong kind of costume or in costume at all and no one else is. And it's just an immediate way of showing that this character is set apart from the peer group. And usually it's pretty funny how different that character comes across. So I just wanted to channel that Elle Woods from Legally Blonde spirit. Just, be yourself and go with it.
A classic movie jerk move is definitely to say it's a costume party, then you show up and you humiliate that person. So glad you brought that up. Yeah, it's that's vintage. That's movie villain 101 stuff.
Yeah, and I was trying to think of like Halloween movies that maybe weren't like all about Halloween, and it was mentioning some of these scenes, and I thought, well, they're not going to end up on my list, but I do want to give it a shout out for those classic scenes.
Perfect.
So before we get to our roundtable questions, Bryce, can you tell everyone what we will be chatting about on our next episode?
Yeah, so on our next episode, we're going to be chatting with librarians Melanie St. Ange and Susan McTishan about an online event that we're going to be hosting at EPL called the How To Festival. So the How To Festival is going to be taking place online on November 21st and 22nd. In our next episode, you'll get to hear a little bit more about the festival and some of the workshops that you'll be able to take. They're going to be on themes such as how to tell your story and how to find inner beauty. So yeah, it's funny because I'm actually working on this project, and I thought that, this would be a great chance for not only for listeners to learn more about it, but I guess for us too, Caroline, to hear about some of the different classes and lectures, I guess, that are going to be included with the How To Festival. And especially with it getting colder, this is going to be a great way to learn from home that weekend.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to finding out a little bit more about what it's all about.
Mm-hmm. All right, so quick roundtable question time, even though there's only 2 of us, Caroline.
We got to go fast on this. We got to go fast. Speedy.
So how much money would it take to get you to spend a night in a haunted house?
Not much. I'm there. That's my answer. Less so money and more, is someone going to give me a ride there?
Throw in an Uber ride there.
Yeah. Although now that I'm thinking about it, I don't know that I would want to be stranded there without my own way of being able to leave. So maybe I should give this a bit more thought before I really commit to it. But I'd be down if someone said, "There's this house, we think it's haunted. Will you spend the night?" I think I would.
Yeah.
How about you,
make
Bryce?
sure maybe there's like a train stop close by if need be.
Yeah. Fine. Just check on the cell reception
right.
situation. How about you?
Yeah. You know what? I might actually pay to spend a night in one. So the one actually in particular that I was thinking of, and this is to me is a dream trip of mine, is, of course, I mentioned how I love The Shining. Well, of course, The Shining, the hotel there, is actually based on the Stanley Hotel in Estes, Colorado. So this is where Stephen King and his wife were staying, where he actually got the inspiration for The Shining. It's rumored that one of the rooms there, of course, is haunted. So yeah, I would pay good money to fly to Colorado and spend the night in that supposed haunted hotel room.
Yeah.
Cheryl, on the other hand, probably would not agree to it. She might have to spend a night in a separate room, but I totally would.
They should have
spend a night there.
they should have like a separate hotel next door to it that's like brand new, no ghosts, no haunting, nothing creepy at all. And so the people who come for like the Shining experience can go there, and then the people they're traveling with can just go have a nice hotel experience.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. So last question.
Yeah.
And this is very important Halloween stuff. What was your most favorite and least favorite treat to get while trick-or-treating?
Most favorite were the little bags of chips. I really like those, even though looking back on it, you get about 3 chips per bag. There was just something, they went into your lunch so well, and then you could take them to school and eat them at lunch for the week after Halloween. So tiny bags of chips were my favorite, and my least favorite are rockets.
Oh yeah.
I do not care for rockets. They're fine. Like, I mean, I'll eat them, but I'm not going to cross the street for a rocket, and I probably couldn't.
They're almost like 100% sugar anyway.
Well, and like chalky, which is weird because like normally I'm not a person who needs a lot of like taste flavor, but there's just something about rockets that I don't care for.
Yeah.
How about you?
Mine were peanut butter cups. Loved getting.
For some reason I thought that was your least favorite, and
oh no,
I just reacted with like, Bryce, it's like I don't even know you.
You're like, this podcast is over. How can you
not
like peanut butter cups?
I don't think we can like get past these differences.
No.
So okay, so I cut you off on your love. We're thumbs up. This is a pro peanut butter cup podcast.
100%. I'm definitely very pro peanut butter cup. Anything Reese's Pieces also too, obviously. But yeah, peanut butter cups were my absolute favorite. Least favorite was pretty much anything healthy. So apples, raisins. I don't know what you homeowners are doing, but don't give that stuff out. It's one night a year.
Do you remember popcorn balls? Was that a thing?
Oh yeah.
Like, people had to make those.
Yeah, I don't get it. Even too with like apples too. There's all those stories about like razor blades going in apples, but like, yeah, I hope people still don't go through the effort of making that stuff. And I'd always feel like, I think my mom would always feel terrible too, because we'd get home and of course parents would go through the candy and like they would just have to throw that stuff out. And people went through a lot of effort with that.
Yeah, but it was exciting when you got to see all your haul after you got home. So
yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So we hope you've enjoyed today's episode. If you haven't subscribed yet, we encourage you to hit that subscribe button so that you automatically get our new episodes. Please also leave us a review on Apple Podcasts and tell a friend about the show.
Yeah, and don't forget that we're going to have a link to everything that we talked about in today's show notes. We're going to have a lot of obviously all of our top 5 favorite Halloween picks included in there and a few others. And we'd love to hear from our listeners. So you can reach us on Twitter at epl.ca and use hashtag EPL Overdue Finds so we can find your message. And tell us about your favorite spooky titles, maybe your favorite horror movies, some of your favorite candy that you got while trick-or-treating as a kid. Let us know and email us at podcast@epl.ca. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.